Welcome back to the regrade series where I take a look at draft classes from years yonder and I slap a grade on it. And today we're looking at the 2017 NFL draft class. Keep in mind, at the end of the week, I do a redraft with this draft class, and y'all passionate about these players. I always love having that nice football discourse in the comment section with you. So let me know what you think, and I'll get into my grading as we get into the first team. But what's crack-a-lackin'? It is your boy Broshmo, just in case you did not know so. And let's do the gosh darn diggity gosh darn thing. And we're going to start with the Buffalo Bills. So when I do these grades, because it gets real particular now that some of these guys, either they got a second contract or they've moved on to other teams. But I like to see how were these players utilized. I'm a bit more harsh with the rounds 1 through 4. And if they manage to get something on mid to late day 3, I take that into account as well. We're not looking at UDFAs. I'm looking specifically at the draft class. So let's start with the Buffalo Bills here, because they kind of hit a home run here. They traded down and they got their player. This was a part of the Patrick Mahomes deal, by the way, but they managed to trade down and grab Mr. White here. He has been their cornerback 1 since. The dude's been great. That's a great pick. I guess I can go ahead and get into the grade. I like this because we're getting into draft classes that I didn't actually have an initial grade for. Keep in mind, I also don't do pluses and minuses. Maybe I'll do that next year, because there are some where it's like some draft classes I slapped the same grade on, but I was like, oh, this one's definitely a plus and this is definitely a minus. This is definitely at the lower part of that grade, but this one is a easy A for me, and we'll get into the specifics because you look at the next pick, Zay Jones. That was their second rounder, early second rounder, and nothing really comes from that. They get a 5th rounder back in exchange for him. They trade him, I think, a couple of years into his tenure there in Buffalo. But Deion Dawkins, a guy that came in as a guard, ended up being their left tackle. He's been pretty darn solid. Matt Milano's been really good for them, easily their best linebacker currently on the roster. And we don't talk too much about the rest of their draft because, well, Peterman, the dude started his career with a pick 6, right? Something like that. And Mr. Tanner there, I think, ends up being on the Cardinals. I don't know. He's kind of a journeyman at this point, like more of a special teamer. But yeah, I'm giving it an A, man. Dude, they addressed the corner position. They got their left tackle of the future. They managed to get a good player here in the 5th round in Matt Milano. Let's move on to the next one. Oh, being my Miami Dolphins. If you didn't know, I'm a Dolphins fan. And straight up, I try my best and darnest to be unbiased. And if you are familiar with the channel, you know I'm pretty harsh when it comes to the Dolphins. I'm sorry, they let me down a ton, and this kind of felt like one of those classes. I ended up giving in. I'm trying to be a bit more lenient on D's and F's, but this one's a fat F. Legit, the only player they really get coming out of here is probably Devon Gacho, and straight up, not even on the roster anymore. He ended up moving on to the New England Patriots. Charles Harris didn't work out for us. He actually popped around, I think, a few places before he settled down in Detroit and actually had a pretty darn good year. McMillan, another guy who ended up being a journey player. Tankersley, or is it Tankersley? Whatever the case, he ends up being another guy that just doesn't end up working out for us. So legit, we miss out on day 1 and day 2. It's just we get a hot lot of nothing. We actually had, Vincent Taylor was a pretty solid depth piece for a little bit. I thought Isaiah Ford would have been a nice special teamer eventually, but didn't work out. But even for what we got with Gacho, he was all right, but I don't think enough to save this class. Didn't end up getting a second contract with the Dolphins. So yeah, it ends up being an F. If that doesn't tell you I'm not biased, I don't know what will. By the way, become a bro and subscribe. Leave this video a thumbs up if you enjoy the content. As always, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Let's have that nice, beautiful football discourse. And the popular thing now to do on YouTube, if you really support the channel, is to share the video. So go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead, get back to the nitty gritty. onto the New England Patriots. So this draft class, there's actually a few notable things because they traded their first two picks for Brandon Cooks, who stays there for a couple of years. I think they traded a third rounder for Connie Ely. I think it was a third. Not positive. Don't quote me on that. I should have made a note of that. But this is why they don't have a lot of picks. They made some moves for some players because they were like, hey, we're ready to win now. But I'm just strictly, I'm not grading them based on the trades. I'm grading on specifically the players that they got, and this one's a fat F as well. Because really, Wise is the only guy that really came out and was good for this team. Like Derek Rivers ends up being a journeyman. Antonio Garcia ends up being another guy that's a journeyman at this point. McDermott, I don't even think takes a snap for the Patriots at all in his career. So it's like, what did you do in this class? I mean, they made trades for like Brandon Cooks. I mean, that's pretty solid. But yeah, really, what have you done? Talk about a guy that's been a journeyman, but like he's been amazing at every stop in his career. Like I think he only has a few, like I think he only has 2 seasons where he didn't finish with 1,000 yards, 2 or 3, something like that. The dude's been really good. The New York Football Jets. I ended up giving this draft class a C, which is middle of the road, which is like, hey, it's all right. You got some players here. Good. And let's really, like, because they didn't get a lot in this class. Jamal Adams. They ended up turning this into 2 first-round picks. They grabbed him at 6. He ended up being a good player for him. They couldn't really figure out a contract, and they ended up flipping him to the Seahawks for 2 first-rounders. That's a fat W. Marcus May. They threw him on the franchise tag. He was pretty darn good for him. He now moves on to the Saints, obviously. But then you look at the rest of this class. Stewart and Hanson don't end up working out for the Jets. Looking at, I'm trying to look at, like, no one else. There's really no one else notable here, actually. If you look at this, like, their day 3 is just nobody. Like, I honestly think McGuire is the only guy that actually plays, like, I say a significant role, not even. Like, I think he plays, like, a few games, and he ends up moving on. I'm pretty sure he went to the Raiders for a little bit. I don't know where he's at now, but I gave it a C solely because they were able to turn that Jamal Adams pick into 2 first-rounders. So, yeah, no one is left on the team, I believe. On to the Baltimore Ravens. I typically love Ravens drafts, and I don't think that changes here. I'm giving this one an A. There we go. I couldn't find the click for it. Marlon Humphrey still with the team, still pretty darn good. I love this cat's versatility. Tyus Bowser, he's another guy that's pretty versatile for him, whether it's as a pass rusher and coverage. He kind of lines up anywhere along that front 7. Dude's been solid. Chris Wormley is probably the only one that was kind of like, I don't even necessarily miss. He was all right for him, and then they ended up trading him to the Steelers for a 5th rounder. I think that it's him and a 7th rounder for a 5th rounder, so you don't get good value back for him. Is what it is. Tim Williams doesn't work out. He came in with an injury concern. I couldn't remember specifically what it was, but Chuck Clark, obviously still with the roster, still plays a significant role. That ends up being a really good pick. Jermaine here ends up being a depth guy that's now been moved around the league. But legitimately, man, those are 2 very good first picks. And then Chuck Clark. Those are the 2 picks I'm really looking at. And on to the Cincinnati Bengals. There we go. Oh, hey, Gojo, I'm not talking about the Chiefs yet, dude. You can't come in here. Got our resident Chiefs fan in Gojo here going through my bag of trash. Don't do that, bud. All right, Cincinnati Bengals. I didn't really like this draft class. Ended up giving it a D. Let's talk about why. John Ross, obviously, being the big miss here. Dude ran fast, just didn't end up being what they expected from... Didn't end up being what they expected, unfortunately. Injuries early in his career, stuff like that. Like Jordan Willis and Carl Lawson. Like Carl Lawson, I think, was the closest to actually emerging as like a really good player, and then obviously gets the big contract in with the Jets, where injury issues then become a thing. Joe Mixon probably ends up, without doubt, undoubtedly the best player in this class that they actually end up picking up. And again, it's the running back position. It's a low value position when you consider just positional value. Josh Malone doesn't work out. You got Ryan Glasgow doesn't work out. And I mean, shoot, Jake Elliott ends up being pretty darn good for the Eagles. And that's probably their best day 3 pick. Like Jordan Evans sees a little bit of time as kind of a sub-package linebacker, but it's just a whole lot of nothing. Gave it a D. You might be like, oh, Joe Mixon's good. Yeah, but again, it's not a very high position of value. You don't want to be walking away from a draft class like, hey, we may have got nobody, but at least we got a running back. It's like, yeah, okay, you could have got that day 3. Calm down. All right, on to the Cleveland Browns. This was one where they ended up trading back into the first round to get David Njoku, who actually just got a pretty good deal there with the Browns. Some may be like, it's not warranted yet. Based on just how utilized he is, it's not like he's a top tight end in the league, but like, dude's good. I ended up giving this class an A because obviously Myles Garrett's fantastic. Arguably might be the best pass rusher in the league on the edge there. Jabril Peppers doesn't end up working out. He gets shipped to the Giants. Yes, the Giants. And I think it was with that OBJ trade. Kaiser ends up being just a big miss. Like, Cleveland had a problem. Like, they couldn't find a quarterback, and we're gonna get to that redraft, and that ain't gonna happen under my watch. Ogunjobi ends up being pretty darn good for this roster. Saw a lot of snaps just this past season. Saw like over 600 snaps. He really liked their interior players. Howard Wilson doesn't really pan out. Roger Johnson's been a depth guy, but literally that's best case scenario depth guy. Brantley actually looked like he was going to emerge as a pretty darn good player, maybe a bit of a steal, but doesn't work out. Zane Gonzalez not with the squad anymore. So overall, it's like this is really carried by Garrett. They're moving forward. Njoku, Ogunjobi ends up being a pretty darn good pick. So, yeah, I gave it an A. Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, just looking at the first part, like, dude, TJ Watt. You got to imagine this is an A. And it is. I'm like looking over to check, and I was like, I feel like this is an A. Now, when I did this beforehand, because I went through all this a couple of days beforehand, did I give it an A? Because we've been through this series in some videos where I changed my mind on teams. But TJ Watt, wonderful for this squad. Juju Smith-Schuster, he was pretty legit with AB, but he ends up being better of a slot guy. Ends up moving on. Now he's with the Chiefs, but they got good 5 years out of him, I would say. Cameron Sutton still with the roster. Ends up they moved him to the outside. I think he's a guy better utilized in the slot, in the box, but he's playing on the outside. He's been a pretty good player for them. James Conner ends up having a really good season. Obviously now he's with the Cardinals, but still he was pretty good for the Steelers. Joshua Dobbs, he's a fun backup quarterback, mentor there in Pittsburgh. I don't know if he's still with the squad though. I mean, it feels like they got so many players right now. Imagine he's still with no, he's with the Browns now. Okay, but like still like I mean, he had moments where he shined when he had to come in for an injured Big Ben, but yeah, no, this is easily this class is carried by their first 4 picks. They were pretty good. All right, on to the Houston Texans. They won't even give the Texans a respect of showing their logo, and they really should. Like this draft class is Deshaun Watson, and that's it. Really, like looking at it, yeah, this is Deshaun Watson, and that's it. It's so weird because if everything didn't really hit the fan with Watson, he'd still be there and still be good. And I mean, they got really good value from him. I'm going to give it a B. I mean, technically, they kind of did find their franchise quarterback. It just things got real muddy. Zach Cunningham was a solid player for him for a little bit before he moved on to the tight ends. Foreman didn't work out. Davenport didn't work out. Watkins didn't work out. And Fuller, I think he's with the Seahawks now. But, gosh, dude, he's a guy you never want to see start at center. He has just been bad. So they got a good linebacker out of it, though. The longevity. He ends up not being on the squad after, and then Deshaun Watson kind of muddies it. I know some of y'all probably be like, "Oh, this is C," but it's like, oh man, like they still got their franchise guy. They did. It's just things didn't work out. I don't think that discredits the pick that much. I mean, to be fair, they got 3 first-rounders out of it, right? Can't remember what the exact value was, but I'm gonna give it B, maybe a C, just because, well, things went south quick. Indianapolis Colts. They're not giving these guys their logos. Is what it is. But I think this is where we were in the. This was a year prior before they got good at drafting. They take Malik Hooker. Things don't work out there. In Indianapolis, now he's kind of like kind of a journeyman. He's kind of found a home with Dallas, but they're just kind of pitching him 1-year deals. I ended up giving this class though a C. Marlon Mack ends up being a good player. Hey, my other dog's up in here, Aquila. How you doing, Aquila? Oh, you ate something, I could tell. Quincy Wilson ends up not being a good pick. Basham's actually been a pretty solid depth player around the league. I think he's with Dallas. Yeah, I think he's with Dallas. I know he had a stop with the Jets. Zach Banner's with Pittsburgh now. Didn't work out for the Colts. Talked about Marlon Mack. Grover Stewart's actually been a very good nose tackle for them. Nate Hairston for like 5th rounder. He was solid depth. Anthony Walker ends up being a really good 7th round pick. A really good one. And now he's with Cleveland, but they still got he was still solid for them for a tenure. So they had good picks here and there. It's like, oh, okay, well, these picks aren't with the team anymore. But it's like, yeah, but still, they drafted decent players here and there. They were able to get, like, the only guy that's still with the squad is Grover Stewart, I think. Because Hairston's with the Vikings now, I believe. But yeah, I mean, I guess you could make, because like Hooker had a really good rookie year. This might be a case where I drop this sucker to a D, perhaps. I don't know. I'm in between D and C. This is why I'm glad someone suggested I go back to pluses and minuses, because this is one where I'm feeling like C minus. All right, but on to hey, we got a logo, Jacksonville Jaguars. Not that they deserve it. I gave this one a D. Leonard Fournette. Wow. Running backs in the top 10. Piss poor value. Like, legitimately, like, the best player they got here out of this class is Cam Robinson, though Dwayne Smoot has been pretty solid for them. He's a good, I would say he's a good, like, backup rotational role player. Like, I don't think he's not a guy you want to be your, like, number 2, but he's pretty good if you include him in the rotation. I think it was injuries with Dede Westbrook or Dede Westbrook, which kind of like halted some of his like progress. Like, I thought he was a solid slot for a little bit. Like, Merrick's been a good special teamer around the league, but yeah, I mean, just because Robinson and Smoot are still on the roster, it's not like even Robinson's played better. I don't think it's warranted extended his contract. Excuse me, but I get it, man. Like, average left tackles are hard to come by. Honestly, this one might be a C minus. I don't know. You let me know in the comment section below. The Tennessee Titans. I ended up giving this sucker a C. Corey Davis, man, he had the good contract year, but you knew he wasn't going to get that. They weren't going to extend him after that. Dory Jackson, injuries kind of like messed up the first part of his career, but he has really developed into a very good player. Taylor Lewan never was able to stick as a like consistent slot guy. Jonnu Smith, Jayon Brown ended up being probably the best guys in this class for the tight ends. Jayon Brown, probably one of the better coverage linebackers around the league. Jonnu Smith, man, just a really good receiving tight end. But, oh, man. Yeah, none of these guys are on the roster still, I believe. So, maybe this is a D. Maybe this is a D. Maybe I need to change how I grade this stuff. I will next year. C-. Let's call it C-. All right. Maybe I'm not being lenient enough. Maybe I should be a bit harsher. All right. On to the Denver Broncos. So Garrett Bowles ends up developing really well after he cut down the penalty problem. Very good. But as for like the rest of this draft class, I ended up giving it a C because like Bowles is like arguably a top 10 tackle in the league. But outside of that, they got nothing from this class. Like DeMarcus Walker is now kind of a journeyman in the league. Henderson just can't remember if it was injuries with Henderson, but he ended up just not sticking. Langley didn't stick, but I know it was injuries. Isaiah McKenzie ends up getting cut, I think, in year 2 and lights it up for. I say lights it up. He is one of the better like wide receiver 4s in the NFL. I will say that. Like the dude ends up being pretty darn good. But yeah, no, like Bowles is like that darn good that it kind of saves this draft class. All right, on to the Kansas City Chiefs. This was the Patrick Mahomes trade. So yeah, this is kind of an A. I don't care what the rest of the class looks like. They got their franchise quarterback and arguably a top 3, if not the best quarterback in all of football. I know their second round pick, he's kind of a journeyman now. I think he's with the Saints. Not positive exactly. But also Kareem Hunt comes into his first start, rookie season, showing up, and obviously he ends up they end up having to move on from him because of some character things that popped up. I can't remember what it was specifically, but it was pretty rough. And then he ends up kind of like rebuilding his career and reputation there in Cleveland. But that was still a pretty darn good pick. But yeah, I don't care what the rest of this class looks like. Patrick Mahomes was a hell of a pick. We'll see him early in the redraft. I'll just say that. Los Angeles Chargers, Super Chargers. And I ended up giving this class a C. Mike Williams ends up being a pretty solid pick for the team. He just got extended this past season. He's one of the better, like, big, deep threats. The Chargers had a run where they could not find good offensive line talent. Like, Lamp and Feeney both just kind of, like, dud out. Rashawn Jenkins, he's an all right box player. He ends up getting a big deal from the Jaguars. I don't think it was worth it. Like, he's all right. He's fine. He's good. I wouldn't have paid him that much, though. Desmond King is kind of now in this, like, looks like he's going to end up being a journeyman. Another guy that's really good in the slot, in the box, around the line of scrimmage. Sam Tevy never develops. Spoiler alert. So, yeah, I mean, it came out with Jenkins, who played well for him, Williams, and Keene. Like, Keene played really well for him. Like, he really did. And now, like, his career is kind of like, it feels like it's plateaued. But, yeah, I gave them a C. On to the Oakland. That's right, you're in Oakland. The Oakland Raiders. And this was, dude, the Raiders had so many bad draft classes. This is an F. Conley doesn't work out. Obi. Oh, man, they should have moved that corner, man, with his physical gifts. But didn't work out. Vanderdos didn't work out. Sharp didn't work out. Markel Lee honestly started more games than he ever should have. He really did. Elijah Hood actually, he had a few moments. I think that's the best way to put it. But yeah, no, this is a terrible draft class. Like, I really only want to give Fs if you got absolutely nothing out of the draft, and they got nothing. This is a bad class. All right, on to the Dallas Cowboys. We're going to the NFC now. All right, Dallas Cowboys, I ended up giving them a B for this class. Taco Charlton doesn't end up working out. He ends up being a bust. But Chidobe Awuzie, like, the best part of his career comes with the Bengals, but he was arguably a pretty solid cornerback too for the Cowboys. Obviously, Jordan Lewis is still there as one of their premier slot guys, but he's like average at best. Ryan Switz doesn't really work out in the slot, or as really, he was more of a special teamer, really. But Xavier Woods ends up being a really good pick. He is kind of now like this. If you need an average to above average starter at safety, like, Xavier Woods is your guy. And like Noah Brown's actually, I think, still with the roster, because they moved on from Cedric. Well, moved on. They chose not to bring back Cedric Wilson, so I'm pretty sure Noah Brown, because he was there with them last year. Yeah, still with them. So he's going to probably take up that, like, wide receiver 4 spot. So that's pretty solid. So all in all, man, it's like, hey, you address the secondary with 2 guys here. You got Woods, 2 in the 6. And then Noah Brown, who's actually going to probably see some play this year. Like, that ain't bad. All right, we're going to the New York Giants. And I gave this class the D. Not a D, the D. Evan Ingram doesn't work out. He was this undersized, more so of a jumbo receiver than actual, like, even receiving tight end. And they ended up moving on from him. He had his ups and downs. We talk about Tomlinson being probably the best part of this draft. Like, he was pretty darn good for the Giants, and now he's there in Minnesota. David Webb ends up just materializing into nothing. Wayne Gallman, he was playing for him, I think, last year, maybe the year before. I don't know. Everything kind of like bunches together after a while. But yeah, no, like they really got Ingram and Tomlinson are really like this draft, and Tomlinson's probably the best player they got. So at least they got that. At least. You done, Gojo? He's over there making a spot for himself. All right, the Philadelphia Eagles. Anytime you're ready, Gojo, you can sit down, buddy. We already talked about the Chiefs. I gave him an A, just like you told me to. Oh, you're gonna scratch? You're gonna scratch in that spot and decide you don't want to be there? Okay. I love that dog. Philadelphia Eagles, I end up giving them a big fat F. Derek Barnett ends up being the only guy, which is weird. They actually got some players in this draft. They just end up not playing well for the Eagles. But Derek Barnett, he had a great rookie year. And then just, that was it. They ended up bringing him back, but not all that impressed. Nathan Gary, I think, is still with the squad. But like, looking at the rest of this class, like Sidney Jones struggled with injuries. Now he's more of this, another guy that's kind of this consistently average starter. Like, he played pretty well with the Jags before moving on to the Seahawks this past season and played well there. Rasul Douglas, best known for playing better in Carolina and Green Bay. Matt Collins ends up having, I think, a good rookie. I think it was a rookie. Yeah, because they end up going to Super Bowl. He has a pretty decent rookie year, and then ends up playing for the Dolphins for a little bit. Pumphrey had his moments, but like, they got nothing out of this class except for Derek Barnett, and they ain't saying much, like, because he ain't that good. So I gave it an F. All right, on to the Washington. Call them whatever the heck you want. I don't care. I gave this draft class a B. Jonathan Allen, one of the better interior players in the league, arguably a top 5 interior player. Ryan Anderson doesn't work out. Fabian Monroe doesn't end up working out. He's kind of this below average starter now in the NFL. Perry, Nichols actually had some starts at safety, but he ends up being no more than a depth guy, a guy you don't want to call on from the bench. Chase Royer, though, what a freaking banger pick, dude. What a banger pick. Low key, probably like a top 5 center in the league. The dude is so good. So good. Jeremy Sprinkle, he actually spent a little time, got his time to shine here, bits and pieces, but I thought he was an okay tight end too. But yeah, no, for the most part, like, I like this class, even though it's like positions of not great value. You could probably say this is a B minus, maybe a C, but I ended up giving it a B. Because, like, to be fair, Moreau was like, he played a lot of snaps for him, and his best days were probably in Washington. All right, the Chicago Bears. The Bears. This is where the Niners tricked them into moving up one spot to go get their quarterback. Unfortunately, they picked wrong. They got Mitch Trubisky, and it ends up setting them back. It really does. The Trubisky pick ends up being a bad pick. I ended up giving this draft class a D. But to be fair, like, at least Mitch, he had them questioning, oh, is he the guy? He might be the guy. But Eddie Jackson ends up being a really good pick. The Adam Shaheen, not so great. Tariq Cohen, unfortunately, recently with him, injuries have really crept up, but he was a pretty good scat back for them. Also took part in the special teams aspect. I would say really, because, like, again, I look at the 5th, 6th, 7th round, I'm like, whatever, I don't care. You expect those guys to miss anyway, but, like, it sucks that this did hit. I mean, I guess it really sucks that this did hit, but kind of is what it is. All right, on to the Detroit. Oh, this is back when Detroit was having really bad drafts. I gave this one a D. Hey, Kenny Golladay ended up being a pretty darn good pick there in the 3rd round. But Jared Davis, Tabor, oh man, like, him and Quincy Wilson just end up being like really bad draft picks out of Florida. Jalen Reeves-Maybin is actually a pretty solid depth guy now in the league. Michael Roberts ends up doing nothing. Agnew's actually a pretty good special team player. But yeah, no, this class is literally, it's Kenny Golladay. It's held by the back of Kenny Golladay. And even if Reeves maybe is like a solid depth guy, like, that's not really what you want from a 4th rounder. Like, even solid is like putting sugar on it, you know? But yeah, I ended up giving this the D. All right, the Green Bay Packers. Ooh. I gave this one a D too. Kevin Keene, not great. Just not great. I don't know how he stays around in Green Bay, but he ain't that good. Josh Jones, he had actually I think he had a promising, I couldn't remember if it was rookie season, and then things fell apart during his sophomore year or 2nd year. And then they ended up moving on from him, and I think it was via release because they couldn't find a trade partner. Adams sticks around for a little bit. Is he still on the roster? Because I always get him and Kingsley Kiki confused. No, he's with Steelers now. Okay. Vince Beagle, he ends up moving to the Dolphins, where he actually plays better. Like, this draft is literally like, oh, hey, look, you got a solid backup running back, and then you got a pretty darn good running back. Like, come on. That's not what you want your draft class to be. It's like, hey, we got a running back rotation. Like, come on, man, miss me. But at least they used it with adequate value. That's when you should be drafting your running backs. Just saying. The Minnesota Vikings. I end up giving this draft class a D. A lot of D's going around. Dalvin Cook, banger pick. They got him in the second. Solid. Pat Elflein, he had a very encouraging rookie season. Did they move him to guard? Things don't go too well. Jaleel Johnson, I think, is still with the roster. A pretty good depth guy. Guided. You could say the same thing. Looking at the rest of this class, outside of Odenigbo, who, like, he kind of had a year where it was like, oh man, watch out, he might break out. Then the next year, you're like, oh, watch out, he might break out. He's more than just a rotation guy. He ends up just being a rotation guy, which is fine. But yeah, they really just come out of this draft class with a hell of a running back and interior depth. That's it. So not great. Come on, let's get a good draft class here. Well, this one ain't gonna be it. The Atlanta Falcons. I gave this one a D. They miss with Tack McKinley. Duke Riley ends up being a guy that I don't know how he sticks around in the league. Special teams. Harlow, I don't even think Harlow even starts a game for the Falcons because he eventually moves on to Arizona. Brian Hill actually plays. He plays a little bit in that running back room. He had some bright moments, but really the best pick here is my boy Kazee. Like, I like this cat a lot. I think he's a very versatile depth piece for any roster. They got him in the 5th round. And I say for any roster, now he's moving around the league. So, did he go back to Dallas? Why am I trying to find this out now? Is he back in Dallas? No, he's with the Steelers. Good pickup, Steelers, by the way. All right, on to the Carolina Panthers. Listen, Christian McCaffrey for CMC, he's been beat up the last couple of years, which is precisely why you shouldn't value the running back position that highly. Like, it blows my mind going back and looking. It's like, geez, man, yeah, wow. They drafted 2 running backs in the top 4. That's nuts. But, like, CMC's been good. No hate, he's been good. He's been good for the Panthers, but not to warrant a top 10 pick. Curtis Samuel actually pretty well before going on and signing a deal with Washington. But he played good. Arguably their best pick, Taylor Moton. He is their right tackle. Could play left tackle if he wanted to, or if they wanted him to. He has done that a couple of times. I know Corn Elder, not last year, but the year before, was not that bad of a slot player for them. And he's more of this now, how would you say, journeyman. I've been using that word the whole time. But, like, man, this one was tough, dude. I lean on A- to, like, B. I'm gonna hold with B here because, like, Taylor Moton is a fabulous pick. Curtis Samuel and CMC, they got a lot of value out of those guys. You know what? Maybe I go to A. I don't know. You let me know in the comments section below. Harrison Butker, he ends up being the big leg, the big boot for the Chiefs. So, wow. Maybe should have held on to that one. And this is what I'm saying, dude. Like, kickers, like, I tell people, like, you don't draft kickers, and if you do, like, 7th round's fine, because you can find good UDFAs at the kicker punter position. But yeah, even Hall doesn't even. He was a 3rd rounder, didn't even play a substantial role. So yeah, I don't know, man. I hover between A and B. You let me know. New Orleans Saints. This was legit the best draft class. I don't even need to look like at what I gave this. It's an A. This is one of the best draft class. This is the best draft class in 2017. Probably one of the best too of all time. I don't know. I'd have to go and look. But Marshawn Lattimore ends up being a very good player. Ryan Ramczyk, arguably the best right tackle in all of football. Marcus Williams, a phenomenal deep safety. just got a big contract from Baltimore after coming off the franchise tag. Alvin Kamara ends up being a pretty darn good player. I would say so. Very versatile. Even Alex Anzalone ends up being all right. Like, he's not bad depth, really, at this point. I think he's with Detroit. Trey Hendrickson, I mean, he has his breakout late for this squad, but it eventually happens, and now he gets a big deal where he actually played really well for the Bengals. Even Muhammad ends up being a good player, just not with this squad. He ends up being going to the Colts and being a guy that Matt Eberflus likes so much, he brought him to Chicago with him. So, yeah, no, this is a banger class. You could legit look, no actual bad pick. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So O.J. Howard ends up being their first pick, and things just don't work out with O.J. Howard and Tampa. They just don't. Justin Evans, he gets passed up on the depth chart. Like, I always thought he was like at least a solid backup. Chris Godwin, easily their best pick. Chris Godwin's a phenomenal receiver. I gave this draft class a C because I mean, it's really, maybe it's more D. I don't know. Wide receiver is so important. And I think you can make a case Chris Godwin is a top 10, top 15 receiver in the league. Like, it's that important of a position. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure Jeremy McNichols just signed a deal with somebody, right? I feel like I saw his name recently. I swore I did. Maybe I did. Oh, yeah, he did. He signed with the Falcons. So, okay. All right. We're down to the last leg here. Arizona Cardinals. And I end up giving this class, I gave it a C. But I kind of want to lean towards B because, like, their first two picks, kind of good. Bubba Baker, really good. Still with the roster, arguably a top 10 safety in the league. And Hassan Reddick, I would say, is one of the top, like, DPRs, designated pass rush only type of players in the league. It just took the Cardinals a minute to figure out, like, they moved him kind of like all over the place before they kind of settled him into that role. But they really didn't hit on Chad Williams. Doran Johnson's now this journeyman in the league. Will Holden. I don't even think Johnson actually plays a snap for them, does he? Not positive. But actually, Rudy Ford's pretty all right depth and special teamer. So that wasn't too bad. So B minus, C plus, just because, like, these top two players are actually kind of good. All right, the Los Angeles Rams, another draft with no first round picks, but it don't matter none because I gave this one an A. Joe Everett ends up being pretty solid. Him and Tyler Higbee were a pretty good duo for quite some time before now he is with... Is he with the Chargers? I think he's with the Chargers. Not positive. But we can figure that out real quick. Yeah, he's with Chargers now. Cooper Kupp, obviously, banger pick. Dude just had a phenomenal year, and that almost feels like an understatement. John Johnson's one of the better safeties in the NFL. Josh Reynolds ends up being a solid wide receiver 4 for them, and now he kind of bounces around the league as a very good wide receiver 4. Samson Ebukam ends up like he's a solid player for them, more of this rotation guy, and then he goes to the Niners this past year and had a really good year. But, like, dude, for where they started drafting their first picks at 44, that's hella good. That's hella good, even though really, like, Cooper Kupp's the only guy that's still on the roster. I thought they still did an outstanding job drafting. But that's just my opinion. Smart was actually a pretty good rotation guy, too. All right, San Francisco 49ers. So, yeah, they were able to fleece the Bears into moving up one spot. That's all fine and dandy, but this draft class ends up not being all that great. I ended up giving it a C because there are high moments. Solomon Thomas ain't one of them. Reuben Foster ain't one of them. Just doesn't work out. Reuben Foster, a guy that could just never stay healthy. He had character concerns too. Witherspoon ends up being pretty all right. Another guy that often would get hurt. Now he's with Pittsburgh, I believe. Bethard, honestly, wasn't a bad backup quarterback. Joe Williams ends up being like the next miss here, but they got Kittle. Like, he legit saves this class, because I'm not going wild about a slot corner that struggled with injuries. I'm not going wild about a backup quarterback that ain't even with the roster anymore. Trent Taylor ends up being bad. Adrian Colbert actually sticks with the roster for quite some time, gets significant playing time. DJ Jones ends up being a really good player. Like, they hit on those day 3 picks. Maybe this one should be a B, because like, Kittle's hella good. Like, top 2 tight end in the league, perhaps at least top 3. So maybe it's a B. I don't know. You let me know in the comment section below. That's where we have that nice football discourse. And let's finish off. I think this is the last one, the Seattle Seahawks. And I ended up giving this draft class a C. Malik McDowell, I think he was the cat that had the quad, I say quad injury, but no, he got hurt on a quad or a motorbike or something. Bosick, man, they really were hoping that guy would emerge, have a breakout year, just never happened. But Shaquille Griffin ends up being a really good pick, even though he ended up moving on. Dedrick Thompson, they really try to see if they have something with them. But really, it's because, let's be honest, man, outside of Griffin, they don't really hit on a pick until, like, David Moore was like a solid option when they had Lockett and Doug Baldwin there. Chris Carson was a hell of a good pick. Just injuries, man. Now he's coming off the neck injury. But he ends up being a hell of a good pick. So I gave it a C, maybe a D. Like, maybe a C minus, because granted, they traded out of the first round and didn't get a whole lot of anything in this class. Again, outside of Griffin, and then they had a good wide receiver depth with Moore, and then Carson ends up being pretty good for him when available. So maybe this is close. Yeah, I think this is closer to D. We'll say D plus, C minus. But you let me know in the comment section below. That's it for the video. I gotta go ahead and record all these other videos for y'all. But if you enjoy the content, like, subscribe, and share. That's what YouTube likes right now. They like when you share the video. If you share the video, it helps support the channel. So until next time, you be easy, my friends. Later.